High quality watercolor has two basic ingredients, pigment and a water-soluble binder. You can buy it in either wet tubes or dry pans, and the only solvent you need to get started is water. The paper that you choose for watercolor is very important. You want to look for a thicker paper, typically 100% cotton, with a weight of at least 300 GSM. Watercolor brushes come in a wide variety of shapes and sizes. They can range from very expensive natural hair brushes to more affordable synthetic brushes. To get started, you really only need a few brushes that can accommodate a wide range of techniques. Here are a few of my favorite brushes, which are mostly various sizes of round brushes. And for the next couple of techniques, we'll focus on a basic round brush. A flat wash can be achieved by applying an even layer of paint with the same concentration. Lighter values can be achieved by using more water to dilute the paint, and a gradient can be achieved by diluting the paint mixture with each subsequent stroke. Watercolor will flow wherever there is water, so you can place water in a specific area and add paint to fill it. A good round brush should hold a point when wet. This allows you to get fine lines, and the width of the line will depend on the amount of pressure you apply as well as the angle that you hold the brush. You can use less water for a dry brush technique to achieve texture, or spread out the hairs for a different effect. Also, you can use paint splatters by banging the brush against another brush or just using a finger to flick. Layering can be used to build up value or mix colors. The first layer must be completely dry though. Since watercolor is a transparent medium, lighter colors won't show up when painted over darker ones. In this exercise, we will focus on painting different values in watercolor. Start off by masking a large rectangle with masking tape, divide it in half, and then divide the left side into 5 sections. I started by mixing a very concentrated mixture of Paynes gray on a palette and painted the uppermost rectangle with what will be the darkest value. From there, with each subsequent rectangle, I dilute it more and more so that I have 5 distinct values. Once it's completely dry, I remove the horizontal tape from the left column. In the right column, we'll be practicing a gradient exercise. Starting at the top with the darkest value, slowly dilute the paint as you move downward, working with horizontal strokes. You want to move quickly while the paint is still wet so that it blends evenly and doesn't form any hard edges. We will try to have the gradient on the right match the rectangles on the left at each corresponding part of the gradient. When making a gradient, it's important to work confidently and not dabble too much with a stroke after you've applied it. So this is a good exercise just to train yourself to see values, and we'll move on to the next one. Using a compass, I made a circle with a radius of 3 inches. Then using a ruler, bisected it down the center. Used a protractor to mark off every 30 degrees on both halves of the semicircle. And then to divide the circle into 12 even parts, just connect the corresponding marks on each side. For my primary colors, I'll be using cadmium red light, yellow ochre, and Paynes gray. But you can use any combination of red, yellow, and blue. With this color wheel, I want to start with the most saturated color towards the circumference of the circle and gradually fade as it approaches the center. This will be combining the gradation skills that we learned in the last exercise with color mixing. I would suggest actually rotating the circle as you're doing it so you can work from top down. Because of the camera, I had to leave it in the same orientation. So if you work that way, you'll get a bit smoother of a gradient. And after filling in the Paynes gray wedge, we have all the primary colors filled. So we'll work on the secondary. For the first secondary, it's a 50-50 mixture of cad red light and yellow ochre. For the next one, 50-50 mixture of yellow ochre and Paynes gray, which gives sort of an olive green color. And then for the third, a 50-50 mixture of Paynes gray and cad red light, which gives a brownish color. And that's the secondary colors for the color wheel. And now on to the tertiary. So with these, it will be 75-25, favoring the nearest primary color. So there you have it, finished color wheel. For this next exercise, we'll be doing a study of the planes of the head statue by John Asaro, starting with a freehand pencil sketch on copy paper. I transferred it over to my watercolor paper and taped it down just with masking tape. In terms of my materials, I'm using Strathmore 500 series Gemini watercolor paper, MaimeriBlu 36 watercolor set. I'll only be using 3 colors out of it though, and brushes by Princeton, Neptune, and AquaElite brushes. So to start off, I first wet the paper and then added a dilute wash of yellow ochre. As I'm putting down this base layer, I'm also considering the values that I'm seeing on the reference photo of the statue, where the front of the face seems to be in shadow. And I'm using a size 12 Princeton Neptune brush. After allowing that yellow ochre base layer to dry for around 10 to 15 minutes, I start to mix up a puddle of burnt umber. As I'm mixing the color, I'm constantly going back and forth and adjusting the amount of water in my brush using a paper towel to dab on. And once I find the concentration that I want, I start to apply it onto the dry base layer. On this side plane of the head, I'm using the gradient technique that we did practice earlier, where it's darker towards the top and it fades out. You have to be careful when you want to get crisp edges. You want to make sure that you never overlap with the wet area, or else it will blur the edges. So like the front plane of the face, I wanted it to have a sharper edge. So as I'm working on it, I try to avoid the wet areas that border it until they dry. Doing value studies of the Asaro head statue is a good way to just practice seeing values if you're interested in painting portraits. Basically, it simplifies the face down into easy to see planes, and then you can, if you have the actual statue, you can put it in whatever lighting conditions that you want. Or there's plenty of photos online that you can find, or even 3D models. Another thing you can do with watercolor is actually lift out areas by just going over them with a wet brush. So at this point, I could just keep going with a monochrome study with using just burnt umber, but I wanted to give the statue just an overall more cooler, like a cooler tint to it. So I'm gonna mix up some Paynes gray and just glaze over the whole thing. And once again, with glazing, it's important that when you're glazing over, you want to make sure that the layer underneath is completely dry, otherwise it will become disturbed. Each additional layer that gets put down also can help to darken the value. And this is basically my favorite way to use watercolor, just to build up a painting with different layers and layers of glazing and just adjusting and controlling color temperature as I go. For the final details, I switch over to a size 12 Princeton AquaElite brush. This holds a little bit less water than the Neptune brushes, which gives you more control. So it's nice for smaller details. There you have it. That's the finished study. I like the Asaro head because it's a relatively simple subject matter in order to practice. And by drawing on a separate piece of paper and transferring over, you can practice multiple times and using different colors. So I hope that was helpful. Thank you for watching and see you on the next lesson.